I'm Casey Bazay, author of the upcoming young adult novel, Not Our Summer, which is coming out next Tuesday, which is super exciting. I just got to hold the final copy in my hand yesterday for the first time at the bookstore when I went to go sign pre-ordered copies. So I'm very excited about that. I hope you will check it out. I'm not going to talk about the book today though. I am going to talk about something that many of us writers experience, and that is called imposter syndrome. So if you are checking out this video, chances are you have felt imposter syndrome. It's something that you have dealt with before, and I'm not an expert on it by any means, but it is something that I've dealt with for a big chunk of my life. So I just wanted to talk about what it is, how it's affected me, and how I've learned to deal with it. So just to define imposter syndrome, in case you don't know what it is, imposter syndrome is this feeling of inadequacy, feeling like you are a fraud and having a lot of doubts about your abilities. So interestingly enough, it happens a lot to high achieving people, which most writers are going to be high achieving people, and it also disproportionately affects women. And that is probably pretty self-explanatory because of how, women are treated in society as compared to men. We often aren't recognized for, our achievements, and when we are, it's harder for us to accept those achievements and those awards. So I'm not saying that every woman deals with it, because they definitely don't, but some definitely do, and that's me. A lot of men deal with it too. It just really seems to be a common thing though within the writing community. So that's why I wanted to talk about it. So just my personal experience, my imposter syndrome began, I think I always dealt with some confidence and issues like as a kid and a teenager, but I remember really feeling like an imposter for the first time when I started barrel racing. So it's an equine sport. It involves running your horse around 3 barrels as fast as you can. And I'd had horses for my whole life, but when I was a teenager, I decided that I wanted to become a barrel racer and start going to competitions. So unlike some people in the sport, I didn't really have like a family background in barrel racing. It's just something I decided I wanted to do. It looked fun. And so I took the horse that I had and I trained her myself, with my limited knowledge. I went to clinics, I read books, talked to a lot of people, learned as much as I could. But it's just something I just started doing. But I really remember when I would go to the bigger competitions, especially where, there were a lot of people with a lot of experience or really good, I felt like a total imposter, like I did not belong there at all, and I was not a real barrel racer. And I remember even voicing that opinion to my mom one time at a competition, saying like, I'm not a real barrel racer. And my mom said, Casey, you have a horse, you're out there barrel racing along with all these other people, you are a barrel racer. And it was like a light bulb moment for me. I was like, oh, she's right. I'm barrel racing, therefore I probably am a barrel racer. I wouldn't say that solved the problem for me, but it did help me to think about it a little differently. So from then on, I know I still had my moments of doubt, but I just thought, I'm working hard just like everyone else here. I may not come from the same background or have a horse with the same training, but I'm participating, I'm doing a pretty decent job of it, so therefore I am a barrel racer. I also dealt with imposter syndrome when I first became a blogger and had my own blog, which I started around 2012 or so. After I quit teaching, I decided to start dabbling in freelance writing, and I also started my own blog, which to my surprise really expanded and did well. I ended up getting blog sponsors, and I had a pretty big readership there for a while. And I don't have this blog any longer, but it was called The Naturally Healthy Horse. And it's where I would just write about whatever I wanted, but everything had to do with horse health. And I would write about nutrition, barefoot trimming. These are all things I've been interested in for a long time. Acupressure, which I was certified in, I am certified in. Herbs, just all kinds of like natural remedies and things like that for horses. But as the blog grew and my readership grew and people started, commenting and interacting with me online and emailing me, I started to feel more and more like a fraud. Like, who am I to be writing these articles on horse health? And I would tell people I'm not a veterinarian. It was stated up front on my blog, but a lot of times I just felt like a big imposter, like I was putting myself out there as some kind of an expert when I really wasn't. Which a lot of times when you write freelance articles, you do a lot of research to write them. You're not just taking this information out of your head and putting it onto the page. You have to do research. And I did research for all of my blog posts, but I still dealt with these frequent doubts, and worrying that people were going to find me out, that I wasn't really this expert that they thought I was. So that was definitely a struggle for me. I also, when I began writing books, and I'm sure many of you can relate to this, but I felt like I wasn't a real writer or a real author. I kind of put my freelance writing and my fiction writing into separate boxes. So like once I became a little bit more confident with my freelance writing, that didn't mean I felt like I was a good or an actual writer when I was writing fiction. So when I began to get involved in the Twitter writing community, especially, I would see these other writers posting things and people who were published authors, and I thought, oh my gosh, like I am not a real writer. I can't put that in my bio that I'm a writer because I don't have a book published. So, and just even working on my books, I thought, who am I to think I can write a book and actually, somebody's going to want to read it. So at some point along the way, I learned about imposter syndrome, and I was able to put a name to these feelings that I was having and realized that I wasn't alone and that it's actually a very common thing with writers. A lot of writers deal with imposter syndrome. So I think just understanding that was kind of the beginning of really helping me to deal with it as a writer, especially. So I do have some personal tactics, which I'll share here in a minute, but just some ways that you can cope, though, just some general methods of coping with imposter syndrome. Number one, acknowledge that you're feeling this way. Acknowledge that you have these feelings of doubt and feeling like an imposter, and learn to maybe step back and just kind of observe that feeling rather than owning that feeling. So I know that's something that can help people. It's just simply acknowledging, putting a name to these feelings that you're having. Something else that can happen or that can help is just sharing how you feel with somebody that you trust, whether it's a friend or a family member. And chances are you'll find out that, they've probably felt like that too at some point in their life. Maybe it's not something they deal with all the time, but maybe they can listen or help you out a little bit. But just getting something off your chest a lot of times can really help you, start to deal with it. Another thing that we need to remember is that it's normal. So just the fact that I'm doing a video on this and that so many writers experience imposter syndrome means that it's probably way more common than you think. And just know that you are not alone. You're not a weirdo for feeling that way. So it's definitely something that many people experience. So for me personally, some ways that I cope with imposter syndrome, and I've gotten better over the years because I've learned these coping mechanisms, but one thing I try to do is not compare myself to other writers. And I know that can be easier said than done, but whenever I read, it tends to, pop up whenever I'm reading a book that's really well written or it's just a really good book, and I think, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be able to write a book like this, and here I am calling myself an author. But I have to remember that I can't compare myself to other authors. We are all different. We all have our own unique writing styles. We all have our own strengths. And there's a huge variety of readers out there who enjoy different things. So one person may enjoy this poetic, literary style book, while somebody else may enjoy something that's just more lighthearted and fun, which is more what I tend to write. So I can't compare myself to somebody who writes in a totally different style than I do. So that's just something that you just have to keep in mind. Try not to compare yourself to other authors, because you know, you're always going to find somebody who you think is better, but you just have to kind of focus on yourself and stay in your own lane. Something else that helps me deal with imposter syndrome is finding and posting inspirational quotes, or thinking of my own inspirational things to write. For me, like, helping other people helps me as well. And a lot of times when I post these types of things, it's as much for myself as it is for anyone who's reading it. So a lot of people have, you know, said, like, I really appreciate the things you post and it really inspires me to keep going. But just know that, you know, I'm posting that for me as well as you, because I definitely have felt, I felt a lot of doubt in my own abilities. So finding those quotes, that just really kind of inspires me to keep going. One other thing to do is just embrace this concept of fake it till you make it. I had to learn to do that early on with barrel racing, again with writing. Even if you don't totally feel like you belong or like you're qualified to do something, pretend that you are, and take that aspiring out of your bio, the aspiring writer, and just call yourself a writer. Because if you write words, if you work on stories, if you write poetry, any of that, you are a writer. You do not have to have an agent, you don't have to have a book deal, you don't have to have 10 published books in order to be a writer. Anybody who writes can call themselves a writer. So just go ahead and own that title. I'm giving you permission. Some final thoughts about imposter syndrome. Something that will really help and help you and has helped me is just finding that sense of belonging within the writing community. And I know a lot of us are introverts within the writing community. A lot of writers are introverts. And so they don't always like to put themselves out there, but it's really just something you've got to learn to do if you're going to be a writer. You've got to interact with people on social media, participate in some of the hashtags like Muse Monday or One Line Wednesday, and, you know, comment on other people's posts and start to interact with them, and you will, within a short period of time, you'll probably start to, you know, form some connections with other writers on Twitter. Participate in contests. I've met a lot of my writer friends that way, just by different contests. We end up, you know, making a Facebook group or a Slack channel or something. But find your little community within the larger writing community, and that will help you to feel like you belong and like you deserve to be there, because you do. So anybody who has this desire to write and wants to write, you can call yourself a writer, but just get in there, put yourself out there, and start to connect with other writers, and that will really help, I think. If you can join a local writers group, critique group, or just you know, some kind of local chapter of a writing group where you can go and learn, attend conferences, that's even better. Just meeting people in person. I know COVID has really hindered all of that, but once we're past this, hopefully we can get back to attending those in-person meetings and things. But that will really help you to feel like you belong to the writing community as well. So those are my tips for dealing with imposter syndrome. If you have other tips, feel free to share in the comments below. And I hope everybody will check out Not Our Summer, which comes out next Tuesday on May 11th. And thanks for watching. See you next time.